Talisman 4th edition SmackDown 1 vs 1. We'll pick the Dwarf and the Druid. Let's get down to business. The Druid begins the game with one spell. He'll pick up Alchemy to start. The Dwarf will start off with rolling a 6. Over at the hills, it looks like he's going to go ahead and draw one adventure card and start off with a bag of gold. Druid's turn. He'll head to the tavern. Let's see if he gets drunk. And he rolls a 3 and loses his only gold. Here's a 3 for the Dwarf. He heads on over in the direction of the tavern, picks up an adventure card. Oh, and he's cursed by a hag. Can't have any followers till he rids her at the village. For the Druid, now an ape of strength 3. Will he come out on top? Looks like he was able to defeat the ape. Now we go back to the Dwarf. Dwarf heads on over to the forest to risk it for the biscuit. Rolls a 2 and misses a turn. Back to the Druid, who rolls a 1. He'll head to the woods so he can get his full complement of spells. He'll pick up Destruction. And here's a 1 for the Druid as the Dwarf missed a turn. What will the adventure card be? It's the Magic Portal. And he's going to end up over at the city. Risky business there. Except he comes out with an extra spell. But since he's at his max, he'll have to choose which one to get rid of. And he will go to get rid of Alchemy, leaving him with Mesmerism and Destruction. And there's a 3 for the Dwarf, who's back in the game. He'll head over to the fields and pick up the Ring, which adds 1 to his strength and 1 to his craft. And back to the Druid. He'll head to the chapel, turn good, and roll a 6 to gain another spell. Looks like he'll choose the Destruction to discard and leave him with Mesmerism and Invisibility. Here's a 4 for the Dwarf. He heads back over towards the hills and picks up the Alchemist. Can't have him though, since he is cursed by a hag. Alright, and there's a 1 for the Druid, and it looks like he'll take advantage of the fact that the Alchemist was ditched on that space, and he'll pick him up. 3 for the Dwarf. He'll head over to the crags and safely sit there, thanks to his special ability. And now with the 6, the Druid heads over towards the fields, and oh my goodness, he's gonna have to fight a demon. Not likely he'll win this one, and indeed he does not, so he will in fact lose a life. Alright, back to the Dwarf. What's he gonna do? He's gonna head 4 in the direction of the Sentinel space, fight a Strength 5 Ogre. And with that, he defeats the Ogre, bringing us back to the Druid. He's going to move 2 spaces over. The Maiden, which adds 2 to his craft. Alright, here's a 5 by the Dwarf. Looks like he'll head just past the crags. Pick up a Strength 7 Dragon. And it looks like he defeated the dragon. So he'll gain a strength right away. Here's a 4 by the Druid. He's going to head over just past the tavern, and he'll pick up a Potion of Strength. And the Dwarf's going again. Well, he sits at the crags. Druid over back at the ruins. He picks up the Book of Spells and a Bear of Strength 3. He now has a craft of 6. He can have 3 spells, so he picks up Psionic Blast. which would allow him to add his craft value to his strength in battle when used. And he picked up that bear, so he's going to use a +2 to his strength with a potion of strength. He will fight that bear successfully, adding him to his trophy collection. Now the dwarf rolls a 2 and heads to the chapel. Does nothing there. Well, the druid will now go over to the tavern once again. He'll have the ability to go on over to the temple if he wants to, next turn. Alright, and back to the dwarf. He heads to the sentinel space once again. Can't have the mercenary, who adds 3 to strength. And it seems we have a rule violation here. Druid was planning on rolling, but then went to the temple instead. And now, having a sucky roll at the temple, he'll use a fate to re-roll and get a 7, adding a craft. And then we go over to the dwarf, who heads to the village and finally gets his chance to get rid of the hag, and he does so, while also picking up a craft with that roll of 5. Druid rolls a 3 and heads to the castle to do nothing to do there, and the dwarf heads to the graveyard to do nothing. Here's another rule violation. The dwarf takes an extra turn and, in fact, picks up Mephistopheles. Meanwhile, the druid's going to turn evil here, and he will gain a craft, so the druid gets the benefit of that turn, though the dwarf technically moved. Anyway, here's a cross for the dwarf over in the woods, and now here's the druid back to the hidden valley. He picks up a wild boar of strength 1, a Solomon's crown, which would add 2 to his craft, and a bag of gold. He's going to cast invisibility to go ahead and avoid that boar. He'll pick up the Solomon's crown, which will add 2 to his craft, and a bag of gold. Back to the dwarf. He's going to head to the crags and sit there once again. And the druid will head over to the woods and pick up an extra spell thanks to his special ability. He gets the Hex. Now he has Mesmerism, Psionic Blast, and Hex. And he gets the Hermit over there at the woods. And the Hermit will end up over at the crags. Player who lands on him gets a free talisman. And now the dwarf's going to move 3 spaces back onto the hills. He picks up the wand. He'll always have a spell in hand while he has the wand. And he gets Teleport as his first spell of the game. Druid heads on back to the Hidden Valley, and he'll go ahead and get himself to a fight with a boar first. Then he'll have a chance to get a water bottle, fight a lemure. He's going to cast Psionic Blast just to add that extra craft to his strength. And he'll easily destroy that boar and add him to his trophy collection. He'll auto-win against the lemure since his craft is so high he mathematically can't be beat. And he'll get that water bottle. Now he's going to turn in some trophies for a strength. And now the dwarf's going to use Teleport to go pick up the merc after getting rid of the hag. He pays the gold to have him. He gets Preservation thanks to his wand. And now the druid goes 1 space over. Picks up the Hobgoblin of Strength 3. Will he defeat him? Looks like he unsuccessfully tried to beat him. And now the dwarf is heading on over to the crags. He'll pick up that free talisman, which he needs to get to the very center of the board at the Crown of Command through the Valley of Fire. It's time for the druid to do something. He's going to turn good as he heads over to the chapel, and there he will replenish his lives. And now the dwarf will boost on past the druid over to the woods and pick up a bag of gold. Druid is going to cast Mesmerism to steal the mercenary. He'll also place a Hex over at the Portal of Power. And then he will move 1 over to the hills. He grabs a Shadow to fight, and he will auto-win. Here's a roll by the dwarf. He heads on over that direction past the crags. Fights a Strength 1 wild boar. He beats up that boar. And now we're back to the druid. Druid heads over to the woods once again. He gets 3 spells: Destroy Magic, Random, and Divination. And here we are at the cave, and he rolls a 1, and that will result in fighting a dragon, but he fates it, and instead he will pick up some gold. Alright, here comes the dwarf back to the hills once again. And the dwarf gets a princess follower, and the druid's going to cast Divination to take a look at the top 5 cards of the deck. And he's got an angel, prince, shadow, mage, and unicorn lined up. He goes ahead and picks up the angel, and while being good, he'll gain a life. Here comes the dwarf. The dwarf rolls a lucky 6 over at the cave and picks up some more gold. And here comes the druid. He's going to go ahead and get a prince follower. The dwarf heads over to the woods to fight a shadow. He successfully defeats him and adds him to his trophy collection. Now the druid will head just 1 past the dwarf over by the tavern. He goes ahead and picks up a mage who will give him a free spell since he's a good character. He picks up immobility to add to his collection. Now he's going to go ahead and cast random on the dwarf, but he rolls a 4 and he loses all of his gold. Now the druid will cast immobility and allow him to get another turn as the dwarf is stuck in his tracks. Now on his turn, the druid moves over to the magic portal and rolls a 6, which will put him in the plane of peril. And he'll cast Destroy Magic at the end of his turn. Now the dwarf rolls a 2. He heads 1 past the magic portal over to the hills. Grabs a unicorn, adding 1 to his strength and 1 to his craft, and now the druid picks up the Holy Grail from the portal of power space. Now back to the dwarf, he moves over to the magic portal. Let's see where this will put him. Having rolled a 2, that's not such a great result he wants, so he's gonna fate it, and he'll actually head on over to the city. It looks like he's gonna use the alchemist to get a gold from his cross. Now the druid with his roll will head over to the woods and get 3 more spells, including healing, random, and teleport. He'll also have to fight a giant now, and here comes the boom. Looks like he pulled it off against the giant, thanks to the mercenary. And here we go with a turn for the dwarf. He heads over towards the chapel direction, picks up the Holy Lance. Now it looks like the druid's gonna cast teleport. Where's he gonna head? Oh, and he's going to throw in a random with it as well on the dwarf. What's the dwarf going to get this time? He rolls a 5, and that actually gives him an extra strength. He's teleporting over to the demon to take him on again. This time, he's not going to get him once again. And here we go to the dwarf. He heads on over to the fields by the village, picks up an adventure card, and he'll have to fight a Craft 3 Spectre. And it looks like he did add him to his trophy collection. And now the druid's going to move on over to the mage, once again pick up Destruction spell. Dwarf heads to the hills, picks up the sorcerer. He'll spend a gold to get a spell. He'll pick up Acquisition. Here's another roll by the druid. And the druid will head on over to the magic portal. He rolls a 6 and heads back to the plane of peril for a 2nd time. And now dwarf is going to go ahead and cast Acquisition, and he will steal Solomon's crown. Dwarf goes to the graveyard, does nothing there for now. Druid will move out to the portal of power, and he grabs a talisman. And here we go with the dwarf. He moves to the chapel, and a destruction spell by the druid. He'll go ahead and eradicate the magic portal. And now here we go with the druid. He rolls and he's going to try to go through the door. He's going to try to bust it open with his craft, and it looks like he'll be successful on that one. Dwarf will head on over to the cave. Let's see what result he gets. And he rolls a 1, which would be a dragon, but I think he's going to go ahead and fate it. He'll roll a 5, pick up a nice load of gold there. Now the druid moves on over to the mines. Will he get the roll he likes? So he's going to fate one of them, and now it's just right. 9 out of 9. He'll stay right there. All right, the dwarf rolls a 4. Which direction is he going to choose to go? It looks like he's going to head on over towards the hills, past the city. Gonna be market day. Let's see if anybody wants to make a purchase. Looks like a shield's gonna be picked up by the Druid, and he picks up a mule, adding an extra 4 item slots. One more space moved by the Druid. He moves to the Vampire's Tower. He'll get rid of the Prince since he really doesn't need him anymore, and he'll avoid a loss of life. Now back on to the Dwarf. He rolls a 1 right over to the fields. And there at the fields, he's going to draw 1. It's a Siren, so him and his region, he's going to have to miss a turn. And now the Druid's going to fight how many Pit Fiends? He's going to fight one of them at strength 4. What an intense battle, folks. He had to use a Fate. And it looks like he's going to go ahead and lose a life. He didn't get out of that one unscathed. And now the Dwarf heads on over to the tavern, takes his chances. He's going to use a Fate, and he will pick up a gold. And the Druid looks like he's taken down that Pit Fiend. He'll just hang out there as the Dwarf does his next turn. Dwarf heads on over to the fields by the city and picks up the Fountain of Wisdom, giving him an extra craft. The Druid is now in the Valley of Fire. Dwarf's gonna head on over to the fields by the tavern. Fight a Serpent of Strength 4. And it looks like he dispatches that one. He'll turn him in with his Ogre for an extra strength. And finally, the Druid's on the Crown of Command. And his first roll will result in a loss of life. Oh no, preservation for the Dwarf. And then he picks up a Psionic Blast. Dwarf is going to head past the woods. He picks up the Pool of Life and grabs himself an extra life, which he'll instantly put back thanks to the Druid's roll. Let's see what the Dwarf does this time. He faces off against a Strength 5 Ogre. And it looks like it'll result in a standoff. Meanwhile, the Druid doesn't roll anything successful for the command spell, and the Dwarf will go get an extra life. Another failure of the Druid, and then another space over to the hills for the Dwarf. He picks up the Enchanter and gets a wish, and with that wish he will teleport over and pick up the Holy Lance. He grabs a immobility spell thanks to the Sorcerer, and the Dwarf casts immobility, and then the Dwarf will roll a 3 and head to the graveyard. He'll pay a gold to get a Fate back. The Dwarf loses another life thanks to the 6 rolled by the Druid in the command spell. The Dwarf will move over to the Sentinel space. He'll pick up an adventure card. It's Goblin of Strength 2, that's an auto win, and a 2 by the Druid results in nothing. And now it's back to the Dwarf, who's going to fight the Sentinel to get through. The Dwarf moves on past the Sentinel. Oh, and he encounters a Witch. And he rolls a 3, so he gains a Strength. Druid makes him lose another life. He makes him lose another life. And now he's in the mines, the Dwarf is, and he successfully makes it through, but there's another life taken by the Druid. Now at the Vampire's Tower, he rolls a high number, fates it. He instead will sacrifice the Princess. No life lost there by the command spell. Dwarf is now fighting the Pit Fiends. How many? He's going to fight 3 of them, but with his high strength, he auto-wins. And now, ladies and gentlemen, he's only got 1 life left, the Dwarf does, after the Druid takes away another one with the command spell. It all comes down to this. The Dwarf sits at the Valley of Fire, right at the doorstep of the Druid. If he's able to survive this roll of the command spell, he can get in there and mess up the Druid with his high strength and his Psionic Blast. Though the Druid can hold out for a little while with his healing spell, the math is not in his favor. The Druid really needs a high roll here of a 4, 5, or 6 in order to take out the Dwarf and stop him from seizing the crown. And here comes the Druid's roll. And it's a 5. My goodness, ladies and gentlemen, he has taken out the Dwarf and secured victory. It was a close one. The Dwarf almost had him. He had fought all the way to the Valley of Fire, but alas is taken out, and the Druid stands victorious on the Crown of Command. As the Dwarf falls over, it is the Druid in the spotlight.